Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tokyo College's online event. All Tokyo College events are special, but today's edition is very special because it is planned and realized in collaboration with a center called MBSC 2030. This is a very difficult name to understand, but the formal name of this small center on campus is Muhammad bin Salman Center for Future Science and Technology for Saudi-Japan Vision 2030 at the University of Tokyo. This center is one of the presidential initiatives supported by MISC Foundation of Saudi Arabia to conduct multiple collaborative research and teaching activities between University of Tokyo academics and their Saudi counterparts. The center was established in 2020 and has more than 10 affiliated laboratories working in the various fields of engineering and technology. We would like to introduce their research achievements from time to time because they are very interesting. In 2022, this center, MBSC 2030, and Toyota Motor Corporation signed a MOU to work together to develop multiple potential measures, mainly in the field of mobility, to contribute to the CO2 emission reduction in Saudi Arabia. I don't know the details of their collaboration, but apparently it works well. Because we have the pleasure of welcoming a special guest speaker for today's lecture from Woven by Toyota Company, Mr. G.F. Bastien, this afternoon, by the recommendation of this center. Mr. Bastien is the distinguished engineer of technologies and standards of the company. He is responsible for the development of vehicle software platform and contribute to Toyota's transformation to mobility company through software. I'm sure we will have an exciting seminar by one of the top learners of the ultra-modern technology. The title of his talk today is Future Mobility, the Relationship Between Humans and Services. Let's listen to Bastien. Please start your lecture.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Let me share my screen. Okay, thank you everyone. So my name is Jeff Bastien. I'm going to talk today about the future of mobility. Then we'll hold a panel discussion afterwards. Sure. So thank you for having me here. As said in the introduction, I work at Woven by Toyota. Our mission is to enable Toyota to use software to bring happiness and mobility for all, which is Toyota's mission. So we, Woven by Toyota, are an integral part of Toyota's broader mission to transform itself into a mobility company. And that's a profound shift in Toyota's business model. From producing automobiles to providing connectivity to people, goods, and ideas. And transforming a company is no small task. It has a lot of risks. And Toyota has transformed before. It used to be a lean company, and it's transformed into an automotive manufacturing company. So Toyota's ambitions are part of why Woven by Toyota exists and why I'm here in Woven by Toyota. Just personally, before moving to Woven by Toyota, I worked in Silicon Valley, first at NVIDIA, then Google and Apple. Silicon Valley, for me, was very exciting because it was a community of developers, software developers, hardware developers, and so on. And it was an ecosystem of innovation, which was anchored by multiple large companies that had the scale and the resources to attract and nurture talented people from all over the world. It's very, very exciting as an individual to be part of this. These companies are all quite young compared to the history of Japan, and they look towards creating new products that create a better world for all of humanity. And so for me, what was exciting about Woven by Toyota is the opportunity to create a similar kind of anchor company for digital innovation industry here in Japan. And what's particularly exciting about our work is that the objective is not simply to create a new company, but it's to support the transformation of Toyota into a mobility company, and by extension, supporting all of Japan. Now, Toyota has something already of an anchor role in the whole Japanese economy today. And when he created Woven by Toyota, the then president and now chairman, Toyoda, asked us to leverage those resources and Toyota's unique place in the Japanese economy to build a company that will build amazing products, but will also serve as a catalyst to change and incubate talent and innovation, just like in Silicon Valley style companies. And the way we do this at Woven by Toyota is by blending cultures. So we're not only creating another Silicon X, we're creating something new by bringing Toyota and Japan's expertise to the world of Silicon Valley and vice versa. Woven by Toyota is hiring talented individuals from Japan and outside of Japan to create this culture blend. Our objective is to create a deep technology culture which respects tradition. And what I find interesting about this seminar today is that we, you included, have an opportunity to grow our digital economy. And the need is really clear. It's estimated that Japan faces a deficit of 789,000 software engineers by 2030. That's a lot of people missing in the software engineering space for Japan. And as future engineers and innovators, I think that you have the opportunity to close the gap and create an innovation flywheel for Japan itself. And this opportunity is not unrealistic to fulfill because I think innovation is a fundamental part of Japan's DNA, of Japan's identity. And in fact, I want to give you an example. When you think about Toyota's greatest contribution to the world economy at large, I would argue it's not cars, it's not automobiles. I think Toyota's biggest contribution to the world so far has been the Toyota production system. It's a method for efficient development and innovation. I've highlighted some of the principles, not just of TPS, Toyota Production System, but of Japanese culture here that are well understood in this field. I think TPS is the basis for agile software development methodology if you're a software engineer. And this is the dominant approach for software development. But it's also in production management more broadly today. It's used beyond manufacturing. It's used in healthcare. It's used in many other places, food production and so on. TPS is really used everywhere in the world. And so I think with this type of innovation that Toyota has and that Japan has promoted, we have the opportunity to talk about how this innovation flywheel plays out in the world of mobility, how investing in software not only is a first order benefit, but unlocks a series of knock-on benefits further on. But first, I want to define what mobility is. What does that word mean? Well, in English, mobility comes from the Latin word mobilitas. It's the condition of being movable, or to put more simply, the ability to move. And at Woven by Toyota, we want to develop software that increases the ability to move in many forms of the word moving. And so today I want to focus with you three areas that we're trying to increase mobility in. First, improving how vehicles are built. Second, improving the quality and safety of those vehicles. And third, expanding what those vehicles can do beyond just the movement of people and goods to the movement of information, energy, and to support communities at large. And for Woven by Toyota, the key to everything I've described is something we call ARENE. It's Woven by Toyota's vehicle software platform. And as I've highlighted on these slides, ARENE OS is a vehicle software platform that allows Toyota and its partners to develop, deliver, and update software-driven customer experiences. And so it's purpose-built for the needs of global OEMs, such as Toyota, with features that help manage and integrate complex development chains and maintain consistency and quality at global scale. So that reflects a lot of Toyota's own values in what we do. And the ARENE platform, as I've detailed here, consists of three main components. You see Arene tools, Arene SDK, software development kits, and Arene user interactions. Now, it seems a bit complex, but this is what we're aiming at to create a software platform that helps Toyota deliver software quality at scale and transform itself into a software-first mobility company. I want to give you an example of what, as a software engineer, this looks like. So here I've illustrated what the traditional software development methodology is in traditional OEM manufacturers, such as Toyota. As you see here, it's siloed, it's separated development, which leads to some amount of inefficiencies. And I've highlighted some of them in this picture of development phases. The traditional development process that we have here made a lot of sense when software was a small part of the vehicle, so 20, 30 years ago. Software and hardware back then were tied together. They came hand in hand, and the suppliers provided economies of scale by selling to competing OEMs. So if you're familiar with how automotive works, the tier vendors, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, sell to multiple automotive OEMs because that creates economies. That makes a lot of sense. However, software has now recently, say in the last 10 years, become a significant part of the vehicle to provide advanced features. These features are not simply infotainment, the screen that you see on the vehicle, but it's also electronics and electrical platform that control and improve energy consumption, the handling, and the safety of the vehicle. And the life cycle of software and hardware are fundamentally different. Software can be developed and tested in an agile manner continuously. It's easy to reuse and copy. That's not necessarily the case for hardware. Now, the traditional way that I picture here is built into the automotive business model. All the traditional OEMs have roughly the same model that I highlight here. And software becoming bigger and more important, this traditional way has shortcomings when compared to a company that would be fully vertically integrated, that would have all of these functions built into itself. And so what I'm going to show you next is the model that we're trying to move towards incrementally. If you see, it's the same model, a lot of the same phases, the same work, but it's shrunk a lot in terms of how long it takes. The Arene platform that I mentioned supports the separation of hardware and software, and it provides centralized platform for software development. And so as you see here, the lines between the vertical lines allow us to do alignment between software parts much more rapidly. It allows us to do simulation testing in a virtual vehicle. And it does what the industry calls shift left. So a lot of the development happens earlier. You still have the same quality, the same testing and whatever else, but you have more testing that allows you to find issues earlier and faster and fix them faster. And the Arene way that I've described enables frequent and in-depth collaboration. Suppliers can remain significantly different between each other, which is important. The vehicle OEM is able to have suppliers come together on a single platform to perform coordinated development. And in this way, Arene is built to give OEMs the gains of vertical integration while maintaining the advantage of diversity of suppliers. That advantage of diversity of suppliers is one that Toyota benefits from greatly already today. And it's something that we want to maintain. Now, when I talk about platform, what might not be obvious is what I mean when I say platform. What is a platform? Often when we speak of a vehicle software platform, people think of the software executing inside of the vehicle, right? So they think of, say, Android or iOS platforms for comparisons on a phone. That's a part of the platform, but I would instead draw a parallel to a factory that makes vehicles. Of course, the in-vehicle parts of the vehicle are important. The wheels, the seats, the engine, important parts of the vehicle. But vehicles have electrical and electronic platforms, just like smartphones have an OS. However, what makes Toyota successful is what happens in the factory. That's a platform as well. Not just the end product, the final vehicle, but also how that end product is created and how the factory is continuously improved. Right? The solidity, the strength of Toyota vehicles comes from what happens in the factory and the design phases of the vehicle. And so that's why the ARENE platform has an in-vehicle component as well as a development platform, similar to a factory. The latter part is similar to a factory, which is why we call our development platform the software production lines. The software production line is the underlying infrastructure that provides scale and allows us to invest in quality at scale. It lowers the cost, it creates shorter delivery times, and it unlocks new use cases. And so we draw a factory with a factory that delivers millions of vehicles, and we draw a parallel to ARENE, which allows us to deliver millions of lines of code. Now, central to this software production line is a concept that Toyota is deeply familiar with. It's data and visibility to enable continuous improvement. I have an illustrated example here of some of the data visibility that we create. And some of the things that come out of having this visibility are things like real-time visibility into the software production, which means that anyone can have visibility across work streams, giving them a real-time comprehensive view of software development. There's also automated integration that we borrow from the concept of Jidoka, where bugs and checks and other processes occur automatically each time code is compiled, right? So automation with a human touch. And finally, we have a virtual and-on core. So same thing as in a factory, issues are flagged in real time for rapid resolution, allowing for global quality control. Now, critical to automation and visibility is being able to have a virtual vehicle. That's a model of the vehicle in a virtual environment, as well as a model of the vehicle's hardware. So we have simulation and virtualized testing. And as illustrated here, we can test many variants of the same vehicle and scenarios. And these tools allow for rapid iterative development. The cycle is at the center of the Toyota production system, the plan, do, check, act cycle. And it really is the same as the scientific method of development. So it's not unique to software development or to the Toyota production system. This is the scientific method of iteration. And beyond the development processes, the approach that we're promulgating unlocks consumer benefits after the vehicle purchase. So not just for Toyota and its development, but for consumers, people who use the vehicles afterwards. For example, the data focus and interaction cycles enables finding complex issues and addressing them through over-the-air updates so that your vehicle gets better over time. So we have examples here of Toyota's electric vehicle powertrain software engineers who can create triggers that alert them of faults and issues with the battery, such as battery degradation. These are things that are hard to plan for early in the vehicle phase, and often you find very late. And this is the type of thing you can find and address through data at scale. The engineers can monitor the trends across a globally connected fleet, reproduce, debug, and resolve these issues using software tools. And then they can be resolved over the air before they impact too many customers or cause recalls or things like that. And so what I just showed is an in-the-field improvement, but the ARENE platform also enables improvements during development of the vehicle. So here we have a comic that we've created to illustrate what a chief engineer, the designer of the vehicle, the lead engineer of the vehicle, how they could use the software production line on a particular vehicle variant to instantiate a particular configuration of a vehicle in development. So in the first image, the Toyota chief engineer urgently needs to know the current status of the vehicle software development. The chief engineer on the second one reviews the ARENE software production line visualizer tool to find the correct vehicle model that they want to look at. And a quick software test can be executed using a virtual vehicle with the ARENE virtual vehicle. A virtual environment can be created using ARENE to put the software virtual car in the virtual world. Following this comic, the chief engineer can try out this variant before actual vehicle hardware is available. They can also try out particular scenarios, visualize failures, and iterate with the engineering team to improve the vehicle. So again, in this example, the chief engineer can now firsthand experience the user experience of a new vehicle model, what it would feel like. The virtual vehicle environment provides a scenario required to easily test safety critical features. And the software production line visualizer shows any tests that are failing. So in this example, we have a failing test identified in red, And with the team, the chief engineer discusses how to leverage test data to improve, in this case, the pre-collision system that might have failed. So a modern platform such as the Arene platform makes the vehicle easier to program while maintaining functional safety. In turns, it makes it possible to open up the vehicle to third-party developers. So fleet operators can customize their vehicles. Various companies can safely offer different vehicle experiences than those provided by the original OEM. So in our example here, in the development environment, we have standardized plug-and-play development environment with pre-built safety and security protocols. We combine this with a testing environment, so live in-vehicle testing suite that disables driving to allow for safe application testing, or in a virtual environment. And this allows us to unlock an application ecosystem, or so a rich universe of applications for customers to choose from natively in the vehicle, just as the OEM is able to do when they develop the vehicle from the beginning. So one example of a software-intensive experience is advanced driver assistance. The way Toyota approaches automation, so driver assistance, is the same as I talked earlier, Jidoka, automation of the human touch. It's developed in the factory and on the software production line, and it's used in the driving products where the vehicle supports the driver as they operate the vehicle, right? So this automated driving assistance is there to assist the driver in performing the driving task. So that's one example of a software-intensive system that we have in vehicle. Another example here, driver assistance supports the driver in their task. It adds protection to reduce mistakes. This is achieved through advanced machine learning and data-driven improvement. It's available today in some of the advanced Toyota and Lexus vehicles that you can buy under the Teammate brand. And it's something that's created for drivers to increase safety and create a better value in the vehicle overall. And I'll give you two examples of data-driven improvement. So these are examples that recreate urban scenes. This is a virtual environment, right? So this is a 3D model of what would look like a real street in Japan. This is a suburban scene of a near hit scenario with a child. So we recreate a real world scene in a virtual environment that we can tune. And what we do is we use data-driven intelligence technology to reduce traffic injuries and deaths through advanced safety features. The safety system continuously improves through virtual environment scenario and at-scale data collection. So in this context, intelligence means applying the lessons learned continuously from the past and present to the future. And as you can see in these two videos, the top video was created without data. It's a pure machine learning system created with the intent of helping the driver. And as data is collected to improve it, we're able to increase the safety of the system by performing more accurate and faster recognition. So being able to recognize a pedestrian much faster than we were earlier. So you can see the red square is when the computer vision system recognizes the pedestrian. And you can see that that happens in this case almost half a second faster, which is quite critical. Here's another example, similar scene recreated in 3D in a virtual environment of a near miss of a bicycle collision. And so here we do the same for other types of obstacles too. We can do simulations of collisions with animals or cones or any other kind of issues that the vehicle would want to detect and support the driver in driving safely. And performing these continuous improvements based on real-world data has difficult aspects such as privacy. And so the key for us at Woven by Toyota is to have empathy in our approach in order to gain trust and participation to create a safer society together. Doing so requires putting safeguards in place to have strong privacy preservation. So we're very, very careful with how we deal with data to support privacy. And in this example here, being able to improve the system over time provides much earlier detection, almost a full second earlier, and detects that it's a bicycle, so allows us to estimate motion and other things much faster. And so these are just three examples that I gave you, but the approach we're taking with vehicles is used at large in software-intensive systems with strong privacy. And the goal is to support mobility of automobiles. But this is just the start. the same approach can benefit society by connecting the social infrastructure to software-intensive systems. Of course, doing so will require focusing on helping humans and having fail-safes. Technology cannot be the purpose in and of itself. The purpose that we serve is to improve the lives of humans. So imagine what we can realize when we apply this type of approach to battery electric vehicles supporting a smart distributed grid. Right? So being able to have batteries all over a city to have a smart distributed grid. Or when we apply the concepts of autonomous predictive maintenance to wider infrastructure. I have a few examples here. This is the type of thing that we're enabling with the software work that we create. And so, in short, for us, this is a pivotal moment for the industry when software can accelerate our progress towards an advanced mobility society. 94% of all accidents are caused by human error. And we believe that with the advancement of technologies, tools, and software, automotives will become more connected and more intelligent, and one day truly will be able to get to zero fatalities in vehicles. With that, also, you'll have personalized experiences connecting you and your vehicle in new and more meaningful way. And Woven by Toyota will continue to play a critical role in building cars that are safer, more joyful to drive, and more personalized than ever before. So with my talk, I want to leave you with a few thoughts. First, Toyota is improving how vehicles are built by becoming a software-first mobility company. Second, this improves the quality and safety of those vehicles. And third, it expands what those vehicles can do beyond just the movement of people and goods to the movement of information, energy, and to support the community at large. So this was my talk. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bastien, for your very concise but rich and dense information. I forgot to tell the audience that you have a button below your screen and beneath of your screen that you can, if you have some questions, remarks, or comments, please use that button, Q&A button, and send your comments, questions, anything, either in Japanese or in English. I can pick up some of them and ask the speaker later. But before that, we have a wonderful commentator, discussant today, Professor YOKOHARI Makoto. He's a professor at the Department of Urban Engineering, School of Engineering. And he's an expert of environmental planning and design and making research on sustainable landscape planning. At the same time, he's responsible for the project called Arise City, by which he plans the future of Tokyo urban city of Tokyo urban plan in collaboration with Mitsubishi Estate. So this is a kind of big battle between two big companies, Mitsubishi and Toyota in Japan. So please, Professor YOKOHARI, start your comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Haneda. And also, thank you very much, JF, for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. And also, of course, I have been hearing a lot about Woven by Toyota, but I think this was the first time to know, what you're trying to do, besides, what kind of city you're trying to make in the foot of Mount Fuji. So that that was a sort of an eye-opener for me. And also, personally, we just started just before this presentation, and I realized that your English is Canadian because I also had a chance to live in Canada. So that as soon as we started to talk, I thought, oh, this guy's from Canada. So, well, we'll be chatting that story afterwards anyway. Okay, so first of all, let me share my slides. Okay, is it on now? Thank you very much. So, according to JF's talk, I understand that Jay was talking about how Toyota is improving their quality, the vehicles, And also how they're trying to make new functions, or how the vehicles will be able to serve different kind of services in the future. But on the other hand, what I would like to raise here is that what kind of infrastructure we have to consider when we are talking about future mobility. Because my background, once again, is in urban planning. And of course, urban planning is all about how to make cities or region, so that it's pretty much the story about the infrastructure where we can have new type of vehicles or so. So from that point of view, I'd like to give some comments, and I'm giving about 15 minutes, so that let me just start with my presentation. So the title is Considering Future Mobility from Land Use Characteristics of Japan. Now, once again, I'm not a specialist in transportation science, so that I know just a little bit about the transportation systems. But I do have my colleagues in my school who are transportation scientists, and I had a chance to talk to them before this presentation today. And I was asking them, so how would you define Japanese road systems or transportation systems? And they said that, well, in short, on one hand, we have very high density road networks, as you can see from this figure on top. And here you can see that the road density is very high compared to other countries, including France, Germany, UK, or even US and Australia. And this is no wonder, because our land area is about 70% mountain, and we only have about 30% flat area, which is not only for the cities, but also for agricultural uses as well. So consequently, where people are living, the roads will become very dense. And actually, we are accommodating about 120 million people on this tiny portion of land. So once again, it's no wonder that we have a very dense road systems on one hand. But at the same time, our cities are having long history. Sometimes the history is more than 1,000 years or so. So that the roads are sometimes very old, and we didn't have so much chances to improve the roads. So consequently, the roads are very narrow, sometimes meandering as well. So as a consequence, as you can see in the bottom figure, that the speed of the vehicles are very slow. And here I only have big cities like Tokyo, Paris, Frankfurt, London, New York City. But even you take these big cities, as you can see, the Tokyo is way down in terms of the average speed of the vehicles. So in short, the Japanese road systems are very high density, but low in quality. So why is this? Well, once again, as I said, 70% of the land area is covered by mountains. So that's one of the reasons. But let me just explain the basic difference in the structure of an urban region in three metropolises here, which are Paris, Tokyo, and New York City. Now, when it comes to New York City, if you go out about 15 kilometers from the city center in Manhattan, near Central Park, then you come to the place which is called East Rutherford in New Jersey. And to be honest, I've never been to this city before, but when you take a look from the Google, then what you find is this kind of landscape, which is a sort of very typical American suburban landscape with detached houses surrounded by lawn. And then when it comes to Paris, 15 kilometers, same. You come to the place which is called Argenteuil. And of course, the design of the houses are different, but the idea is basically the same. Once again, it's a typical suburban landscape where you have detached houses surrounded by the greens and so on. But then when it comes to Tokyo, 15 kilometers away from the city center, from the Imperial Palace, you come to the place which is called Nerima City. And what you start to find here, which you can never find in Paris or New York City, is that you have already a lot of agricultural lands, tiny patches of agricultural lands surrounded by residential neighborhoods. So it's a sort of already 15 kilometers away from the city center, still in the Tokyo city, but you start to find this mixture of urban and rural land uses. Now let's go 40 kilometers away from the city center. New York City, you come to the place which is called Pyramid Mountains in New Jersey. And here, mostly forest. And you might find some villages in this region, but 90% or even more than that, what you find are forests. And then when it comes to Paris, you come to the village, which is called Vigny. And here, it's mostly pasture, so that agricultural lands, pasture, and a little bit of villages, but that will be it. But then when it comes to Tokyo, once again, 40 kilometers out of the city center, you come to the place which is called Kawagoe City in Saitama Prefecture. And here, once again, it's the same story. It's a whole mixture of urban and rural land uses, as you can see from this Google. So that, in short, when it comes to cities like Paris or New York City, which represents North America and also Europe, somewhere in between 15 kilometers to 40 kilometers, there is a certain boundary between urban and rural. So there is a line somewhere in between 15 to 40 kilometers. But when it comes to Tokyo situation or Japanese situation, it's very difficult to find a boundary. And it's a sort of continuous mixture of urban and rural, which goes on and on and on until you hit the mountain range. So this is a sort of a character that we were talking about when it comes to cities and region in Japan. And of course, this goes back to the history. But anyway, to make this a long story short here, so when it comes to Western cities, on one hand, you have agricultural lands surrounding the city, but once you are inside the border of the city, what you find are mostly urban land uses without any agricultural lands. But when it comes to Japanese cities, what you find is that, of course, you have agricultural lands in rural areas and also urban land uses in urban areas. But at the same time, what you find is that agricultural lands are remaining in urban fabrics. And at the same time, you find urban land uses in rural areas as well. So it's once again, it's a whole mixture. And again, it goes back to the history of how our cities were developed or how the cities in Europe were developed. Here I have medieval European cities. On one hand, on your left, you have Paris, France, 16th century. On your right, you have Copenhagen, Denmark, 18th century. And of course, you can easily realize that there is a very clear boundary between the city and the surrounding countryside. And of course, these are city walls or moats in some cases. But when it comes to Tokyo or Edo, former Tokyo, Edo, we studied how the land use used to be in Edo, and we figured out that Edo was already one of the largest cities in the world, which accommodated more than 1 million population already in 18th century or 19th century. But still, the land area was almost like a 40% agricultural. So even though that we were accommodating huge amount of people, population density of Edo was about 5 to 6 times higher than today. But still, 40% of the land area was for agriculture use. And when it comes to whole Kanto Plain, this is in Meiji. So still you can see, tiny dots everywhere in Kanto Plain, which symbolizes that how the land use were mixed in the whole Kanto Plain. And these are some of the scenes that you will be finding even in the city center of Tokyo, where you find tiny patches of agricultural lands remaining in urban fabrics. So to describe this kind of land use systems, on one hand, when it comes to Western cities, as you can see on your left hand, you have a very clear separation and you have a very concentrated urban areas, as you can see on the left. But when it comes to Japanese situation, it's very vague. And also it's sort of scattered in the countryside as well. So you don't find any clear boundary between urban and rural land uses. And yes, of course, modern urban planning has been telling that what you have to achieve is something that what is happening in the West, because this you call is well planned and ordered and also efficient. And when it comes to Japanese situation, we have been told that this is unplanned, disordered, and insufficient. So whenever you open up a textbook of modern urban planning, they say that what you have to achieve is on your left, and what you have to get rid of is what you find in your right. And that's exactly what we were taught when I was at the university as well. So this will be reflected to the road system as well. So when it comes to Western cities, yes, you may have a very ordered, well-planned network of the roads. But when it comes to Japan, once again, it's very dense, but at the same time, it's very narrow, meandering, and consequently, the speed is very low. And what the transportation scientists will call that this is a very low quality road network. So once again, it may be the same story. You know, this is something that we have to achieve on your left, and what you have to get rid of will be on the right. But then when it comes to Japan, or not only Japan, but maybe in other part of the world as well, yes, there are a lot of natural disasters, including earthquakes and tsunamis. And also because of the global climate change, now we're facing with a lot of events like floods, heavy rain, and so on. And then on top of that, now we're starting to face with a food and energy crisis. And then, of course, we can't forget about this infectious disease spread, which has been covering whole world for these 3.5 years or so. And all of these events are saying that now the risks are increasing, especially if you are living in a concentrated manner, then the risks are increasing. But on the other hand, when it comes to new technologies as ICT and smart mobilities as well, and then also when it comes to energy, distributed renewable energy systems, these new technologies are guiding us towards dispersed living as well. So on one hand, concentration is coming to be more and more risky. But on the other hand, new technology is saying that, well, you can just live dispersed way, and it may not be so inefficient. So that simply dispersed might become better than concentration in the future. And then, of course, you know, we are now starting to find this new lifestyle, work style based on teleworking or so. And especially within the 3 years, this came to be spreading everywhere in the world. So that what I would call is that we're now coming to the era with from gray and compact to green and dispersed. So if this is a case, if this is a sort of future that we're perceiving now, then, well, I would say that what you can call green and dispersed will be on your right. And that means that maybe in the future, we'll start to say that what you find in right are safer and livable and also more sustainable than what you find in left, which are unsafe, unlivable, and unsustainable. So maybe there'll be a chance in the future that we can go this way, opposite. So if this is the case in our future, the big question is, okay, so how can we design future mobility that may support this green and disperse? So that's all about my comment, and I'll be very happy to have a discussion with you afterwards. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your very interesting and stimulating comments. And I'm sure that Jeff has some response or discussion against or with his comments.
Yeah, I think what you've shown us today is very much in line with what we want to be able to achieve, where I was talking, there's big gains in vertical integration in terms of manufacturing, but in terms of agriculture as well. Centralizing production has gains, but it has downsides as well.
Right.
So that's why the approach that we're taking is to have this diversity of suppliers, because it gives you that diversity. It gives you these different choices.
Right.
In the same way as distribution, as you were illustrating, gives you that resiliency.
Wonderful. Exactly.
And that resiliency is really important, because not every plot of land is going to be successful in creating crops every year. The same thing, not every supplier is going to be as productive. And if they can compete against each other, then they can learn from each other as well and get better. And having a distributed system, software system, as we're creating, have that resiliency
Mhm.
and support that diverse ecosystem is really critical.
Mhm.
And then enables you to do city-wide system, like human-based systems
Sure.
that are diverse. So
Sure.
I think this is really interesting, and it's one of the things that I like about living in Japan, that the diversity of experiences as well. I like walking around Tokyo and experiencing
Great. Thank you very much.
what you may describe as a mess, I think is fascinating. And
Right.
it
Uh-huh.
has interesting knock-on effects in terms of architecture as well.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
really, really exciting.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I totally agree with you because, I myself will not call this a mess. The modern planning or the planners back in, let's say, 60s or 70s, they were the people saying that this is a mess. And what we have to achieve is what is happening in the West, like Paris, London, New York City. But from my point of view, it's not a mess. Sometimes, the order is not really visible.
Mhm.
But still, once once you start to experience a place, you start to understand that, okay, even though it's not visible, but still there's an order here. And that's something that we have to appreciate in the future, or something that we have to revive
Yeah.
in the future as well, which the modern Japanese are starting to forget about. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. But at the same time, I would like to ask you that, of course, the resilience to raise the resiliency, you need all different kind of places or all different kind of a diverse, plants or so and everywhere. But this means that you might be having more troubles in between those places.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, for example, let's say that the Paris in France are now trying to achieve much smaller unit, like a 15 minutes unit, where everything, not everything, but many of things will be accomplished within about this 15 minutes area, which means that they're trying to minimize the trouble. So how do you think you will be able to match these two different kinds of perspectives? On one hand, you're trying to have this, diversity or the resiliency by traveling a lot or connecting a lot. On the other hand, you're talking about this tiny units. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, so I want to draw two parallels. One of them is the way the Toyota production system works with factories
Mhm.
is that factories around the world different for
Sure.
Toyota. And if you go to them, they're empowered to make choices on what's the most efficient, how much human involvement versus machine support is there, and how do they do continuous improvement.
Right.
And then they're brought together from time to time to visit each other. There's secondment to different plants around the world to
Mhm.
learn from others.
I see.
And bring the learning. And I think that type of distributed, but still centralized control, but distributed learning is part of what you want to transfer outside of factories, right? The same way TPS was used outside of factories, that type of resiliency can be used elsewhere.
Right.
And it's actually the same thing as, I'm a software developer.
Sure.
Not by training, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, but I've become a software developer over my career. The way you build resilient systems is somewhat similar. You have to have some amount of centralization, but also distribution of tasks and built-in resiliency at factories. And I think as a human living in a system like this, you want to be able to have this kind of distribution and resiliency too. In my slides, I had an example about energy systems.
Right.
Once you get to a point where sufficient number of vehicles have large batteries in them, 70 kilowatt hours or 100 kilowatt hours, on 100 kilowatt hours, most houses, if you don't have the air conditioning on, can operate for a week.
Oh,
and so if you have a distributed system and energy shuts down. So when growing up in the 90s, in Quebec, there was an ice storm, and
all
yes,
I remember that.
electric grid shut down because the energy is produced north of Quebec, where there are dams. Right?
Yes,
so I know. I think 99% of Quebec's energy comes from dams. It's all green energy. But you have to bring it down to where people live along the American border. So all of that crumbled because of the ice storm.
Right.
And so some people lost power for a week.
Sure.
If you have a distributed system with vehicles holding energy, with solar panels, with wind power and so on, you have a much more resilient system.
Right.
So there's advantages to having that distribution.
Exactly.
And you can apply that concept to many other parts. Agriculture is the same.
I think so. Yes, exactly.
So yeah, it's really interesting. Like
Yeah.
the parallels in technology are fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's totally something I agree with you as well. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hansen,
Is it okay?
sure.
Yeah, because I'm now reading a lot of questions.
Oh, wow.
asked to both of you. And so if your discussions are now almost over, now I would like to pick up some of the questions asked
Please.
at first to Jeff on some technological issues. First, would be interested to know how the vehicles can connect with EV charging stations. For example, helping drivers to find the nearest EV sharing stations. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is difficult because electric vehicle charging stations aren't standardized. Different companies are trying different things. Different governments want to support this, and this is good. The diversity of what people are trying, including different types of energy, so such as hydrogen, allows innovation. At some point, it's going to centralize, is my expectation.
Mhm.
But for now, what you end up needing to do is to have either one system that understands multiple systems, or for yourself in the area you are, prioritizing those systems. One example I think that's interesting is in the US in particular. I think Tesla has developed a fairly extensive electric system where their vehicles understand where their chargers are.
Mhm.
And I think in the last few years, they've tried to create this standard. Otherwise, you have to have adapters and things like that. But the different companies, I think Porsche has done interesting developments in terms of how their chargers work and so on. They're starting to centralize how the charging works, or at least the adapters. Then finding them, there's companies that have rentals for the chargers.
Mhm.
Some companies have different models. I think the way Tesla's chargers work is they lease the land or own it, but provide that service mainly to their customers. And they're starting to open it up to other electric vehicles. But they've been smart in putting the vehicles where people drive to enable, for example, going from Silicon Valley to Yosemite, there's chargers along the way. Others are going to start to do that. And other companies, such as I think ChargePoint in the US, have a different model where either they own or lease the land, or they let someone like a college campus create a charge point system and then choose how they lease that system to others. It might be limited to, say, people who work on that campus, or it might be more open. When I worked at Apple, we had charge point systems that were only operable by Apple employees because they were behind a gated parking garage. And so there's an interesting kind of different sources of chargers, different ways to find them. And I think as this evolves, it's going to get better, and kind of figure out what the best model is for different locations. I think the US, being very large and you drive everywhere, will have a different solution than, say, Tokyo, where parking is difficult. so I think you're going to have very different solutions, and I'm not sure there's going to be one that works throughout the world. So I look forward to seeing how that works out.
Right. The next one is very simple. Does Woven have a demo page or beta program for evaluation collaboration?
So right now, Woven has multiple parts. Within Woven, I think what's well known within Japan is Woven City, which is a city that's being developed at the base of Mount Fuji.
Mhm.
That's something that is limited access because it's under construction. You can't go and try it, but they have a partnership program for different types of companies for development of things like Internet of Things like that. So they have a program where different companies collaborate. On the other side, we have automotive-focused developments such as Arene and the ADAS product. The ADAS product is primarily something that targets Toyota vehicles. So Toyota teammate and Lexus teammate. You can buy a vehicle, but I'm not sure that's what the question was about. Arene right now is primarily focused on Toyota and Toyota suppliers as the development ecosystem, because Toyota founded Woven to serve its primary purpose, but it is a separate company, just as other tier vendors are separate. So we're working with other suppliers on this platform. Eventually, as with other economies of scale, you would want to be able to reach other OEMs as well, and other suppliers. But right now, it's not something that is feasible because it's still in fairly early phases.
Right. Okay. The next one is from one of our postdoc researchers. Thank you for the interesting talk. I find the automation with a human touch concept especially interesting, which integrates automation with an understanding of the driver experience. As vehicles are mostly used in public spaces, I wondered if Woven has also considered other traffic participants' experiences with such vehicles. I have the impression that much focus today is on avoiding accidents and dangerous situations. But how could future vehicles also promote positive relationships between drivers and other traffic participants?
Yeah, and this is very difficult. I think one of the ones that's most obvious is if you're a bicyclist, if you ride a bicycle, fairly often bicyclists feel unsafe around vehicles. And I think smart vehicles that try to assist the driver will be able to see bicycles earlier and leave them more space. So I think as a shared system, as the road is a distributed system, I think that's one of the primary aspects where you promote collaboration of using a shared space, where usually as a driver, you don't always see the bicyclist. So the car can help you either notice the bicyclist, alert you of their presence, or even nudge the car a bit on the side or something like that. So that's not just helping safety, but it's helping the bicyclists feel safer. In terms of vehicles, I think there's similar things that can be done in terms of, say, following distance or aggressive driving or things like that. There's different things that you can do there as well to incentivize the driver or let them know when things aren't quite right or something like that. And so there's other systems such as drowsy driver detection and things like that, where someone might be falling asleep or not paying attention with their phone, that will help other drivers around, not just the safety of the vehicle itself, the participants in the vehicle, but everyone around. So I think there's a variety of things that can be done to make driving a less stressful and more safe environment for multiple people.
And the next one is, what is Toyota's vision about cybersecurity of the in-vehicle technologies? Because these technologies are heavily dependent on softwares.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, so this is a real big focus for me personally. In the last 15 years, I've worked on systems that you probably all use, and one of the things I do is I create secure products. So both at Apple, Google, as well as at NVIDIA, I worked on the security of the system, particularly in the last few years, as systems such as web browsers or phones or everything else become more used in society, they become more interesting targets for malicious actors, right? So people trying to steal your bank account information or spying on journalists or things like that. And so large tech companies have put tremendous investment in intensive systems to increase their safety. And it's very difficult because many of the systems that exist today were not created with safety in mind. If you look at the internet, I would not design the internet it's designed today if I knew what it would become, right? But at the same time, what's important to understand is that the field of computer sciences is very new. The first real programming language with optimizing compiler and so on was created in 1957. Some of my coworkers and some people in this building might have been born before computer science really became a thing. Whereas if you compare to more mature systems like civil engineering, we're in Tokyo, biggest metropolis in the world, very, very earthquake prone. I work on the 18th floor of a building. I never really think about the safety of the building. I know it's safe. right? Whereas fairly often, I think as a user of a computer system, as a developer, I know some of these things are not safe. I know they're flawed and not well designed. And so I think one of the things we're trying to do as Woven by Toyota and supporting Toyota's transformation to software first company is understanding the quality bar that Toyota has set in its mechanical system and meeting the same bar with its software systems. And what I mean by that is that the expectation of a consumer buying a car is that it is safe, but it's also secure, it's privacy preserving, and so on. And we can't just throw software out there without meeting the expectations that the Toyota brand creates. Right? So I think it's very important for us to put these investments into safety, security, and privacy the same way that Toyota has its brand, it's tied to safety. The Toyota is if you look at brand surveys, it's the 6th most popular brand in the world, the most valuable, the most trusted brand in the world, after 5 tech companies, right? The 6th most trusted brand in the world is Toyota. That's a very big deal. The bar for us to meet in terms of quality is very, very high. It's the most trusted automaker in the world. And we can't create the software transformation by jeopardizing the brand of Toyota. It's very, very important. And so security is a pervasive aspect of what we do in terms of software development.
Okay. The same person asked 2 other questions. The first one is, what is the level of accuracy of virtual environment where the technologies are tested? The second one is, are these technologies ready to be used in the current road systems?
So good question. The level of accuracy is variable, and that's a very important point. When you develop a virtual system, what you're trying to test is important to understand so that you create a virtual environment that matches the testing that you're trying to create. So for example, when I worked at NVIDIA, I worked on the first CPU that NVIDIA designed in-house. And when you design a CPU, you don't simulate the heat dissipation. You don't simulate the electrons going through a wire. You don't always do that, but sometimes you do. There's different levels of simulation. When you design, say, the iPhone, there are simulations of the heat dissipation on the phone. But most of the time, say I'm testing the web browser on the virtual version of the iPhone, I don't really care about the heat dissipation of the phone. But it's very important that the phone in my pocket not become hot when I work with it. So different individuals in a virtual environment will want to have different levels of fidelity of the virtual environment. And it's the same thing for a car. When you develop a virtual environment, you might just want to run the software in a simulated environment or something that's close to the simulated environment. Or you might want to have the full braking system, the full vehicle dynamics, a model for how the tire pressure works, how the tire wear is working, and so on. If I'm trying to test a brake system and the anti-slip system, I'm going to want to have very accurate simulation of the tires and the road and so on, and very different scenarios that I can test. If I'm testing the infotainment system and trying to see if I can play music, I don't care about the tires. And so these levels of simulation, the closest to fidelity is very important. And that's one of the things that's difficult in what we do is the testing scenarios determine the level of fidelity of the virtual environment that you're creating. And you want to basically have multiple systems that you can turn how real and how unreal the system is, how close and far from reality each of them are, depending on the test that you have.
One question from in Japanese, which is translated in English. As automated driving becomes more prevalent, I think in automobile entertainment will become more important than driving itself. What is Woven's view on this?
Well, I think that's true. I think when you look at the development that Toyota is doing, for example, with e-Palette, right? E-Palette was shown at the Olympics, for example. It's trying to show what a driving system would look like without a driver, right? And there you want to have some amount of entertainment in there. Whereas in current systems that are on the road, you don't want the driver to be distracted because the autonomous driving assistance system is there to assist the driver, not to replace them. And it's very important that we don't provide entertainment to the driver, but we help them focus, because it needs to be clear to the driver that they're the ones in control. They're the ones responsible for the driving in the vehicle, and the vehicle is assisting them in following at a safe distance, staying in the lines and everything else, avoiding obstacles. And so I think if we get to full self-driving systems, which I don't think is a thing we know will happen, we hope it will happen, but we're not sure, then we'll want to be able to offer entertainment inside of the vehicle and reconfigure it fully. But until we get there, it's very important that the driver be focused on their task. That said, I think the other people in the vehicle have a lot of entertainment in more modern vehicles. I was looking at the latest Lexus minivan. They have a beautiful TV inside of it and everything. It provides good entertainment, I think. But you know, I think it'll take a while before we have full self-driving where there is no need for a driver. So I think we have to be very careful in the expectations that we set.
Well, now we have more question to you, but now I turn to Professor Yokohari.
Okay, sure.
You have two questions at least. The first one is in Japanese, but it is translated into English. I understand that the decentralization approach dispersed is often used due to recent situations, but there is also talk of aiming for compact cities as a countermeasure against depopulation. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it depends upon the size of the city you're talking about. When I say dispersed, I'm not saying that all those tiny villages in the deep mountains, totally remote, should be remaining in the future as well. That's not my point. At some point, of course, you know, we have to just get rid of or just forget about those the deep mountain tiny villages, simply because that we won't be able to maintain infrastructure to those places, maintaining the road, maintaining electricity systems and sewage and everything. I don't think it makes sense. So that there are some places that we have to close down, and we have to ask those villagers to come down the mountain and come into some sort of towns or cities. But on the other hand, when it comes to this compact city policy, quite often they're saying that everything should be concentrated into one single unit. So that, for example, and quite often, according to this compact city policy, they say that the place in front of the stations, the train stations, are the places where people should come into. And one city urban fabric should be something that they're achieving, is what the compact city policy is telling. And that's something I also disagree as well. So that instead of having one single unit, I think there should be some sort of a level that you'll be having different units. But that means that on the other hand, you have to get rid of those very tiny ones in the deep mountains. But at the same time, you have to forget about the big one single unit, like a one big Tokyo or so. So I think the answer should be in somewhere in between those two. And I think it really depends upon the situation, the topography, climate, and also population. All of those things should be counted to decide at which level will be the appropriate. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The next question to you as well is, how can urban planning and design prioritize public health while reimagining mobility for the future?
Well, first of all, I would like to remind that when modern urban planning was initiated back in late 19th century, the biggest concern of modern urban planning was the public health, because at the time, many cities were experiencing industrial revolution, and consequently, there were a lot of different kind of pollutions in the city: water pollution, air pollution, and also the people were forced to live in the tiny apartment flats where you never have any sunshine or so. And also they you know, even in the European cities or American cities, they didn't have sewage system up until the mid-19th century. So that when the modern urban planning was initiated, this public health was, I would say, the center of the concern of the the urban planning. So having said that, I'm pretty confident that the mobility issue should be part of this public health. But the way that you treat the public health will be very diverse. It's not simply like, put everyone onto vehicle and have a kind of luxurious life. I don't think so. Sometimes, you are supposed to walk to maintain your healthy body or to be in a good shape. Sometimes you really have to practice walking yourself. For example, my father, he broke his leg and had to stay in hospital for a while. And that was a sort of a click that he started to have Alzheimer's. So if he was able to walk around more, then I think he could live much longer. So that, once again, the public health is one of the key concerns for urban planning, but the way how you'll be dealing this mobility in terms of public health is very diverse, and it's not a simple question, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to you, Jeff. Sure. Two or three questions to you again, and then one question to both of you. The first one is in Japanese, but I have an English translation. It arraigns synchronous development and virtual vehicle introduce the Silicon Valley way.
Well, I think there's a few aspects to this. Different industries have evolved differently over time. If you look, so I used to work like a long time ago when I was still in Montreal. I used to work at a flight simulator manufacturer, the one company called CAE that trains most pilots on their flight simulators. So most commercial pilots. I've worked on 777 simulator or 380 and things like that. Virtual airplanes have existed for much more than 20 years. Just because airplanes are so expensive, it made a lot of sense to develop virtual airplanes, which made it so that it was easy to train pilots on them. And then eventually the development of airplanes happened in a virtual environment before the actual airplane existed to be able to do simulation, because the cost of failing to develop a safe airplane is very high because each airplane is expensive, whereas test vehicles are much less expensive. And so I think what's been done in other industries is changing over time because of the economics. I think vehicles have not had virtual vehicles as much. They have virtual vehicles, but creating a real vehicle is much less expensive than creating a real airplane. And so a lot of the technology that we're looking at developing today comes from industries such as aviation or industries such as hardware design, the CPU and GPU design, where creating going to TSMC and creating a die of a GPU or CPU is extremely expensive. And so these economies are really what's leading the changes. As these economies have gotten down and the vehicles have gotten more expensive, it makes sense to adopt these types of technologies much more. So in this case, I don't think it's really a Silicon Valley thing, even though some of the technologies were pioneered in Silicon Valley. I think they were pioneered there, for example, CPU design and so on, because of the economies. At the same time, a lot of the advanced technologies that are being used for simulation were not created by Silicon Valley. There's what's interesting with software is anyone can create software in their basement. And in fact, you use software daily that was created by people in their basements because of that scale. Anyone can create software, and if it's good software, it's used everywhere. One example is there's this emulation platform called QEMU that's used. It was created maybe 15 years ago by one French person called Fabrice Bellard. It's used pervasively inside of the industry. In fact, this one French person has created multiple projects that are used pervasively throughout different industries. And so I don't want to say that Silicon Valley is the thing that we're following here. It's more of a software mindset that we're following. What we're following from Silicon Valley is the business mindset, the focus on humans, the focus on innovation, and so on, not necessarily the virtual vehicle technology itself. So it's a bit of an odd distinction I'm making here, but I think it's important.
One more question in Japanese is, what kind of data is used to speed up the recognition of pedestrians and bicyclists?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of vehicle sensor that you have. So different vehicles have different sensors. Some of them have cameras, different number of cameras. They have sonar, so very short distance, and some of them have radar. And over time, the sensors that you have on vehicle change. And the modern approach that people take towards this is something called sensor fusion, where you take multiple sources of inputs and you fuse them into a virtual map of the world, as well as adding LiDAR to it. LiDAR is not as popular, but it's getting very popular, where you use kind of lasers to identify things. And LiDAR allows you to have a map of the world on which you can see the lines in the street. Like the lines on the street are big, the paint is big enough that you can see it on LiDAR. And so when you fuse all these sensors together, you can create a map of the world, throw away the information that's not necessarily relevant, keep the one that is, and then choose different scenes that are relevant to what it is that you do. And so that's the type of data that's used to be able to then create virtual scenes, create variants of those scenes, right? Identified, oh, well, this is a near accident. What if, there was an occlusion? What if there's a bush here that prevents you from seeing certain things, and so on? Create a virtual environment, create a lot of variants, and then you can train a system to detect things earlier based on this.
Well, so one more question from a friend, Professor YOKOHARI and I met earlier today. This is a question, a fundamental question for both of you. Do you think that cars will still have nowadays shape in the future? How will they match cities or countryside, changing shape for use and environment?
Well, I think it depends on the multiple factors. One of them is, so what's the purpose of the vehicle? If the purpose is to go slowly on the last kilometer of your route, then a box is fine, right? A box doesn't have aerodynamics that it particularly cares about. It's more comfortable for people if they're standing, right? It looks like a bus, right? And so are cars going to basically become buses with different sizes based on the capacity? I think so. For local transit, I think so. For long range transit, are cars going to be a train? Well, I would not replace the trains in Japan. I think they're pretty good, right? But there's a gap between what a bus can do and what a train can do, where you might want to have vehicles with different capacity that are more versatile, that allow people to go to different places. But then if they need to go to a certain speed, you will still want to have the same aerodynamics, right? So that they're energy efficient. And so I think you might not have a steering wheel if full self-driving becomes a reality. So you might have infotainment or things like that. Maybe it makes sense to turn the seats so that people can face each other. But otherwise, I think the general shape will be the same. Right? It really depends on the purpose and the intended speed and how it matches in the rest of the system that you have. I don't think we need to reinvent the bus or the train. I think we need to improve them and support them with other means of transport.
So in your opinion, mobility is critical for human future, and for that purpose, car is indispensable. Well, any type of car,
I think it bridges a gap between different modes of transportation, right? Like cars won't be able to take you from Japan to the US because there's an ocean between them, right? So I think different modes of transportations have advantages and disadvantages, and it's always like that gap between 100 meters, 1 kilometer, and 10 kilometers versus 100. That's hard to bridge. And it's also that mobility is adapted to an individual, right? I assume your father, when he was in the hospital, if he had more mobility solutions, would have been able to at least go outside and maybe recover faster. As people age, they can't take a bicycle 3 blocks down the street, and having automated vehicles that would help support them would probably help them have a healthier life overall.
Right.
And so I think understanding what works well in the current mobility systems and what kind of vehicles are missing to support different types of needs is very important.
What do you think about the?
Well, I quite agree with JF's point, but something that I would like to add on is that I think in general the transportation systems should become more public. But the meaning of public might be a bit different from what you're talking about, the public transportation today. Because whenever you say public transportations, people quite often think about buses and trains and so on, and everyone should get together onto those vehicles. But in the future, I think the public means that it's a sort of publicly shared personal transportation systems, which includes, on one hand, very small ones for last 1 mile, like e-bikes or e-kickboards or so. By the way, I'm a very heavy user of the e-kick bikes, but anyway. On one hand, I think that's something that you have to consider about for the last 1 mile. And on the other hand, you might be talking about the ordinary vehicles like what you find today, but it's not personally owned, but it's a sort of a shared one. So that, publicly shared vehicles will be another direction that you have to think of when you're talking about public transportations. So I think that's something that should be seriously considered in the future. And also, as you say, I totally agree that you have to talk about all different kind of the vehicles that you're talking about. If you're not talking about the long distance, then of course, you have to be concerned about the aerodynamics, and it can't be like a box kind of buses. But if you're talking about the short distance, then that can be something like e-bikes or e-kickboards. So all of those should be mixed together, but the key will be how you translate public is something that I would like to raise.
And I think with this change, if you have this change that happens, you go from privately owned vehicles being used, say, 5% of the time to public vehicles. So vehicles being shared between different people being used close to 100%.
Exactly.
That changes the economics of it, because
that's right.
The individuals don't have to spend a lot of money in that vehicle anymore.
Right.
They spend based on usage.
That's right.
But it means that vehicle has to be much more reliable. Like Toyota vehicles last for 15, 20 years. But if you use them 20 times more, that lifetime will shorten.
Exactly.
The mechanics of
sure.
And so I think that kind of continuous usage will change how they're used, how they're maintained.
Right.
And it might change their price point as well. As
definitely, yes. Definitely, yes. Exactly.
Most people won't pay more than 3 million yen for a vehicle.
Right.
4 million yen for a nice one. And, if it's a shared resource, you might pay 50 million yen for a vehicle.
Right.
That makes more sense because it's amortized on multiple people. And
exactly.
It's not that you're going to make the vehicle out of gold. You don't want to just make it ridiculous. It's about making it more comfortable, more usable, and lasting longer.
That's right. Well, I totally agree with that. Exactly. So I think that's how Toyota should be in the future as well. I mean, instead of making 3 million yen vehicle in Japan, maybe there should be focus on to triple times more expensive or 4 times more expensive, but much more reliable, and will be lasting for 20 years or so, even though that is going to be used for 100%. So yeah, I think that's going to be the future then. Yeah, totally agree with that.
Well, thank you very much both for very lively and interesting discussions. Now the time is now almost over, and I want to close today's event. It was very interesting, and thank you, audience, for your very stimulating, thought-provoking questions as well. And let's see again. Let's meet again soon in the next YOKOHARI's event. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for both.
Thank you very much too.
Thank you for having me.